gospel for today comes from John chapter 2, verses 1 through 11. It's found on page 71 in your New Testament if you'd like to follow along. Hear the good news for this day. On the third day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what concern is that to you and me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now standing there were 6 stone jars for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to them, "Fill the jars with water." And they filled them up to the brim. And he said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the chief steward." So they took it. When the steward tasted the water that had become wine and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the steward called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and then the inferior wine after the guests have become drunk. But you have kept the good wine until now." Jesus did this, the first of his signs in Cana of Galilee, and revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. This is our good news for this day. Please pray with me. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be pleasing in your sight, O God, my rock and my redeemer. Amen. Grace and peace to you from God, our Creator and our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. John chapter 2, the wedding feast of Cana. It's a story that has always struck me as a little strange. If you were to imagine Jesus' first miracle, giving everything that you know about him, believe about him, all the things that he stood for, you wouldn't have had his first miracle happen in this way. If you saw Jesus in more of a fire and brimstone way, maybe he'd, at that wedding, call down fireballs from the sky. Or if you saw him more closely aligned with the poor or those in need, maybe he'd make bread rain from the sky. There's biblical precedence of that. Maybe you'd make his first miracle a healing, or even preaching, or teaching, or pretty much the last thing that you would make his first miracle is turning water into wine. And it doesn't even happen because he wants it to happen. In the basic rules of storytelling, your protagonist, your main character, your hero, he's always meant to be proactive. They are always meant to be proactive. They go out and do something. They are in control of their own destiny. But not this Jesus. Why does Jesus do what he does in this story? It's not because he wants to. He immediately resists. Jesus does the first miracle of an endless string of miracles that leads to the greatest moment in human history. He does that first miracle not because he wants to, but because his mama made him. If only other little boys were so well behaved and listened to their moms and slept in their beds through the night. But hear the text again. Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what concern is that to you and to me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servant, "Do whatever he tells you." There is a verse missing. My hour, that's a no. Woman, what concern is this to, calling your mom woman? That was not It's like his mom doesn't even hear him. It's like, no, and she's like, yeah, he's going to do it. Just get him what he needs. The first miracle of Jesus the Christ, Savior of the world, happens not because there's a dire need, there's no starvation that's happening, and someone's not dying. His first miracle is not even because he wanted to. But he does it because his mama will not take no for an answer. So are we supposed to read more into Mary in this story? Mary, Theotokos, God-bearer, party girl. Look at, she started him young with that fancy hat. Is that the takeaway of this story? The power of Mary to make Jesus make wine? I'm fine with that, but that seems like an odd first miracle, an odd takeaway. You might not know this or realize this because it's a pretty popular story. I think we all have heard Jesus turning water into wine. That's something that sticks in your head. But you only hear this story every 3 years, in year C, on this Sunday. And so, unlike so many other miracle stories where there's different versions or different ways they're told, this one only appears in the Gospel of John. We only have this story written in this exact way. This is the definitive account of the wedding feast of Cana. Jesus' first miracle. And it's a weird one. But in all the brief things that are said here, the deeper you dig, the less odd this miracle becomes. What is Jesus' main reason for not wanting to take on the rewarding task of turning water into wine? I mean, if I could turn water into wine, I would do it almost endlessly. It would be hard to find drinking water around people. You come to FLCC and they're like, where's the drinking fountain? We have a wine fountain. I mean, I get that there's downsides to that. There's obvious downsides. But why does Jesus not want to do it? Woman, what concern is that to you and to me? My hour has not yet come. His hour, his time, has not yet come. What is Jesus' time? This is one of those things about the Bible that we actually know. We know exactly what he meant. Jesus' time is a straight biblical line that runs one way, to Jerusalem. His more or less final stop in Jerusalem. Jesus' time is a clock that strikes midnight on the cross. His time is death. His time is resurrection. So within that framework, think about what his mother wants him to do. She wants Jesus, whose life is defined by his death, to lead out his ministry with making some really good wine. How do those two things come together? Death and celebration. How do these two pictures line up in any sort of meaningful way? I can almost hear someone asking that question when their life lines up with the promises of God that seem to be absent. You said God would protect me. You said God would watch out for me. You said I would gain something in this life as a Christian. I would build my house not on sand. I would be a ship protected from the storm, but look at me now. How do the abundant promises of God line up with the at times abject suffering of God's people? It has been the experience of countless humans throughout history that this world is hard, impossible, and all you get for your labor is death. This has led more than a few people to believe that this God that so many people believe in must be as cruel as the world, as merciless as a lion in the wild. And on this day of celebration in Cana, when all those day laborers and all those guests at the party were given perhaps their first break in a month, their first time off from work in months. You can imagine how they would have reacted to the festivities running short because they ran out of wine. We hear that. We hear this part of the story. They ran out of wine, and we think, well, they can just drink water. But that would have been shame brought onto the family of the one that did that ran out of that wine. It would have been an end of the party, an end to their break from work, and really an end to the reputation of that family. And Jesus watches that scene unfold. Yes, he acts, but not because he's a boy that's so devoted to his mother, or because he's the ultimate mama's boy. Jesus does so because of who he is, the very face of God. The final answer to life's most endless question, what is God really like? I can imagine the concerns would be there for Jesus. What would people make of this story, this wedding feast of Cana story, when his time eventually did come? When he was up on that cross? When everyone finally realized that Jesus was God incarnate walking among us? Would they think that life is going to be an endless river of great wine brought to you by your very own deity? Would Jesus become a new picture of the god Dionysus, the Greek god of wine and celebration? Would the people misread this act as they had misread so many others? Jesus did this miracle not because it was the right time, or because his mama told him, but because he is the God of abundant life. And when the time for celebration comes, you must celebrate it. And when the time for sacrifice comes, you have to climb up on that cross. Abundant life is messy and confusing. It doesn't happen how you would imagine. Abundant life carries with it failure and tears and wrong places at the wrong time. Abundant life carries with it seemingly endless bad decisions and foolishness and heartbreak. But it also carries with it laughter and consolation, friendship, and love. It's true, this is not how you would imagine the first miracle of Jesus. It's not how you would imagine the God that we imagine in our head to act. But this happens to be the action of the God that actually is, not the God of our imagination. And that God has come to show us that abundant life is so much more than we realize. What it looks like to fall back into the loving arms of God. I've said it a number of times. If you think that you understand every part of God and know every facet of God, you don't know God at all. Because God is so very big, so very beautiful, so very loving, so very strange. So when the jugs of wine are missing and life appears to be a slow road to the cross, understand that God has not forsaken you. Far from it. God has lived that and lived out the promise that you will come out clean on the other side. Abundant life is real. Not because all of life is lived in a wine-filled haze, but because God cares for you, provides for you, and promises that no matter what crosses you might face, you do not face them alone. That is the abundance of the real world, not of our imagination. God keeps the good wine for you all the way to the end and beyond. Amen.